The words came out of my son's mouth with a coldness I didn't recognize. We were standing in the living room of the mansion I had built with my own hands, the home where I raised him, where his father and I created a life together, and Kieran was looking at me like I was a stranger he needed to evict. The registry office already recorded everything in my name. Starting tomorrow, Mom, you're leaving this house without taking even the clothes on your back. My hands trembled. I could feel them shaking at my sides, but I didn't open my mouth. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't beg. I just stood there, 57 years old, staring at the 32-year-old man I had given life to, wondering when exactly I had lost him. Camilla was standing next to him, that venomous smile barely disguised on her perfect lips. She was wearing one of those designer outfits that cost more than most people make in a month, her platinum blonde hair styled in those perfectly messy waves that take hours to achieve. She had her phone out, angled just slightly toward me, recording this moment, probably. Another piece of content for her pathetic Instagram account that never quite took off the way she dreamed it would. My mother, Dorothea, gripped my hand so tightly I could feel her wedding ring digging into my palm. She was 81 years old, and in that moment, I felt her entire body trembling next to mine. Silent tears were rolling down her weathered cheeks, but she didn't make a sound either. We Hartwick women, we knew how to suffer with dignity. Did you hear me, Mother? Kieran's voice had that edge to it, that tone he used when he was trying to sound authoritative in court. He was a lawyer, after all. Corporate law, though he had never been particularly successful at it. Not like his father had been successful. Not like I had been successful. I heard you, I managed to say. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Camilla shifted her weight, her heels clicking on the Italian marble floor that I had personally selected 15 years ago when Raphael and I renovated this place. We've already contacted several real estate agents, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The property should list for around $8 million, though in this market we might need to take 7.5. Still, that's more than enough for us to finally get the lifestyle we deserve. The lifestyle they deserved. I wanted to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. This was my life being dismantled by my own child. I thought about Raphael in that moment. God, how I missed him. 3 years he'd been gone. 3 years since that massive heart attack took him from me at 59 years old. We were supposed to grow old together. We were supposed to travel, to enjoy the fruits of our labor, to watch Kieran build his own life and give us grandchildren. Instead, Raphael was buried in Greenwood Cemetery, and I was standing in our home being told to pack nothing and leave. There's a lawyer outside with the paperwork, Kieran continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. Everything is legal and binding. You signed the transfer of deed 2 years ago, remember? When you said you wanted to make sure I was taken care of if anything happened to you? I remembered. Of course I remembered. It was 6 months after Raphael died, when the grief was still so raw, I could barely breathe some days. Kieran had been so attentive then, so concerned. Weekly dinners, daily phone calls, always asking if I needed anything. He told me it was smart estate planning, protection against lawsuits, tax benefits. I trusted him. He was my son. He was my only child. What a fool I had been. You don't have to do this, my mother finally spoke, her voice shaking but fierce. Kieran, your father would be ashamed of you right now. This woman gave you everything. She worked 16-hour days to build the business that paid for your private schools, your college, your law degree. She raised you with love and kindness, and this is how you repay her? Stay out of this, Grandma, Camilla snapped, dropping the fake sweetness entirely. This is between Kieran and his mother. You're just living here on borrowed time anyway. I felt my mother's grip tighten even more. I squeezed back, trying to communicate without words that it was okay, that I could handle this, even though I wasn't sure I could. From the kitchen, I could hear Catalina moving around. She was my housekeeper, but that word had stopped being adequate years ago. She was my friend, my confidant, the person who had been there through everything. 15 years she'd worked for me, and I knew she was listening to every word. I knew she had probably crossed herself several times already, muttering prayers in Spanish under her breath. I need you both out by 9 tomorrow morning, Kieran said, checking his watch like he had somewhere important to be. The movers will arrive at 10 to remove anything of value. You can take personal items only: clothing, Toiletries, photographs, nothing else. The furniture, the art, the jewelry, all of it stays. The jewelry was my mother's, I said quietly. My grandmother brought it from Italy when she immigrated. It's been in our family for 4 generations. It's part of the estate, Kieran replied without emotion. It stays. Camilla was typing something on her phone now, barely paying attention. Probably texting her friends about her big score. The mansion she was finally getting. The life of luxury she could finally showcase properly on social media. I looked at my son's face, really looked at it, trying to find some trace of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares, who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them beautiful flowers, who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the whole world. That child was gone. Or maybe he had never existed the way I remembered. Maybe I had built a fantasy version of my son, and this cold stranger in an expensive suit was who he had always been destined to become. Where do you expect us to go? I asked. Kieran shrugged. That's not my problem, Mother. You're a smart woman. I'm sure you've saved some money over the years. Get a small apartment somewhere. Jersey, maybe. Or one of those assisted living places for you and Grandma. Assisted living. I was 57 years old, in perfect health, with more business acumen in my little finger than Kieran had in his entire body, and he was suggesting assisted living. There's a Marriott about 15 minutes from here, Camilla offered helpfully. You could stay there for a few nights while you figure things out. Just put it on a credit card. A credit card. To stay in a hotel. While they sold my house. The rage that flooded through me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was white-hot and all-consuming, and it took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to let it show on my face, because I knew, in that instant, that if I let them see how deeply they had hurt me, they would enjoy it. Camilla would definitely enjoy it, and some sick part of Kieran probably would too. So I did the only thing I could do. I stood there, hands trembling, and said nothing. Well, I think we're done here, Kieran said, snapping his briefcase shut. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 sharp. Have your things ready. They turned to leave, and I watched them walk toward the front door, Camilla's heels clicking, Kieran's expensive leather shoes squeaking slightly on the marble. They looked like a couple from a magazine advertisement. Young, beautiful, successful. They looked like they had the world at their feet. The heavy oak door closed behind them with a solid thunk, and the silence that followed was deafening. My mother collapsed into the nearest chair, her small frame shaking with sobs she had held in during the confrontation. I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her shoulders, feeling her cry into my neck the way I used to cry into hers when I was a little girl. Catalina emerged from the kitchen, her dark eyes red and swollen. She had been crying too. "Señora Marlena," she whispered, crossing herself again. "What are we going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I had built a real estate empire from nothing. I had come from a family of Italian immigrants who worked in factories and cleaned houses. My father died when I was 16, and I started working full-time while finishing high school to help my mother make ends meet. I met Raphael when I was 23, working as a receptionist at an architecture firm. He saw something in me, believed in me, partnered with me. Together, we created something beautiful. We bought distressed properties, he designed stunning renovations, I found the buyers, and we made millions. This house, this mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, sitting on 3 acres of prime real estate with 8 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms and a view of Long Island Sound. This was my achievement. I bought it with my money. I renovated it with my vision. I raised my family here with my love. And my son had just stolen it from me. But as I held my mother and looked at Catalina's frightened face, something shifted inside me. The initial shock was wearing off, and underneath the hurt and betrayal, I found something else, something harder, something that had been forged through years of fighting my way up from nothing. I thought about Raphael's last words to me, spoken from his hospital bed 2 hours before he died. His hand had been cold in mine, his breathing labored, but his eyes were clear. "Marlena," he had said, "you're the strongest person I've ever known. Whatever happens, whatever comes, you'll survive it. You'll do more than survive. You'll thrive." I hadn't understood what he meant then. I thought he was just being supportive, trying to prepare me for life without him. But now, standing in my living room 3 years later, I wondered if Raphael had known something. If he had seen something in Kieran that I had been too blind to see. "We're not going anywhere," I said quietly. My mother pulled back to look at me, confusion in her watery eyes. "What?" "We're not leaving," I repeated, louder this time. "This is my house. I don't care what papers Kieran has. I don't care what he thinks he's done. This is my home, and I'm not surrendering it without a fight." Catalina's eyes widened. "But Senora, he said the law—" "I know what he said," I interrupted. "But Kieran isn't the only one who knows lawyers. He isn't the only one who understands how the system works." I stood up, my mind already racing. Dr. Harrison, Raphael's attorney, the man who had worked with us for 30 years. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral, hadn't needed to. But I needed to now. My hands had stopped trembling. The weakness I felt just minutes ago was gone, replaced by something that felt like steel in my spine. "Catalina, can you help my mother upstairs? Get her settled in her room. This has been too much stress for her heart." "Marlena, I'm fine," my mother protested, but I could see how pale she was. "Please, Mama, rest. I need to make some phone calls." As Catalina helped my mother toward the stairs, I walked to my office on the first floor. It was a beautiful room with built-in bookshelves and a mahogany desk that had been Raphael's. I sat in his chair, ran my hands over the smooth wood, and allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to feel the full weight of what had just happened. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Harrison's number. It was after 7 in the evening, but I knew he kept his cell phone on at all times for important clients. We had been important clients once. I hoped we still were. He answered on the third ring. "Marlena, is everything all right?" "No," I said simply. "Everything is not all right. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. It's about Kieran and the property transfer from 2 years ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Harrison spoke again, his voice had changed. It was careful, measured. "I was hoping you wouldn't need this," he said. "But Raphael, he left something for you, just in case." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" "Come to my office at 8 tomorrow morning. There's an envelope. He made me promise not to open it unless certain conditions were met. I think those conditions have been met now." "What's in the envelope?" I asked. "I don't know," Dr. Harrison replied. "But Raphael was very specific about when you should receive it. He said, if Kieran ever showed himself to be unworthy of your trust, if he ever turned against you, then I was to give you this envelope immediately. He said it would protect you." I closed my eyes, and for the first time since Kieran had said those cruel words, I felt tears building. Not tears of weakness or defeat, tears of gratitude. My husband, my partner, my love, he had protected me even from beyond the grave. "I'll be there at 8, I said. "Marlena," Dr. Harrison's voice was gentle now. "Whatever is happening, whatever Kieran has done, we'll fix it. You have my word." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of the office for a long time. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, the trees rustling in the Connecticut night. Somewhere in this house, my mother was probably still crying. Somewhere else, Catalina was probably praying. And somewhere in Manhattan, my son and his wife were probably celebrating their victory, already planning how to spend their millions. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated me. They had looked at a grieving widow and seen weakness. They had looked at a mother's love and seen stupidity. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Tomorrow morning, I would go to Dr. Harrison's office. I would open that envelope, and then I would show Kieran exactly who his mother really was. But tonight I would grieve. Not for the house or the money or the property. I would grieve for the son I thought I had, the son who apparently never existed. I would grieve for the little boy with dandelions in his hands and nightmares that only Mommy could chase away. That child was gone, and in his place was a stranger who needed to be taught a very important lesson about the cost of betrayal. I was still sitting there at midnight when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful footsteps. For a moment, my heart leaped, thinking maybe Kieran had come back. Maybe he had realized what he had done. Maybe there was still a chance to save this. But it was just Catalina, carrying a cup of chamomile tea. "You should sleep, Senora," she said softly. I will, I promised. Soon. She set the tea on the desk and turned to leave, but I stopped her. Catalina, thank you. For staying. For being here. She looked at me with those warm brown eyes that had seen me through so much. Where else would I be? She said simply. This is my home too, and you are my family. Real family. Not the kind that shares blood, but the kind that shares everything that matters. After she left, I drank the tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through my chest. The house settled around me, all those familiar creaks and groans that I knew by heart. This was my home, mine, and I wasn't giving it up without one hell of a fight. What Kieran didn't know, what Camilla couldn't possibly understand, was that I hadn't built my empire by being weak. I hadn't survived poverty, prejudice, and loss by being fragile. I was Marlena Hartwick, and I was about to remind everyone exactly what that meant. The night stretched on, and I finally allowed myself to think about what might be in that envelope. What could Raphael have left that would protect me? What had he known or suspected about our son that he never shared with me while he was alive? Tomorrow I would find out. Tomorrow, everything would change. But first, I had to get through this night. This long, painful night where my hands had trembled, but I hadn't opened my mouth. This night, where my son had destroyed me with words, and I had stood there and taken it. That silence wouldn't last forever. Soon, very soon, I would have plenty to say, and Kieran would have no choice but to listen. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I lay in the bed I had shared with Raphael for 32 years, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the crown molding as car headlights occasionally swept past on the road below. And I remembered. God, how I remembered everything. Raphael died on a Tuesday, March 15th, 3 years ago. The IDs of March, though I didn't think about the Shakespeare reference until much later. He had been working in his home office, sketching designs for a boutique hotel project in Stamford. I was in the kitchen with Catalina, reviewing grocery lists and discussing what to serve at a dinner party we were planning for the following weekend. I heard the crash first. The sound of his body hitting the floor, his desk chair rolling backward and slamming into the bookshelf. By the time I got to him, he was already gray. His lips were blue. His eyes were open but unfocused, and he was clutching his chest with both hands. The ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. I know because I counted every single second. I performed CPR the way I had learned in a class 20 years earlier, pressing on his chest, breathing into his mouth, begging him not to leave me. Catalina was on the phone with the dispatcher, her voice calm and steady, even though tears were streaming down her face. They got his heart beating again in the ambulance. At the hospital, they rushed him into surgery. I sat in that horrible waiting room with its fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs for 6 hours before a doctor came out and told me they had done everything they could, but the damage was too extensive. Did I want to say goodbye? I did. I held his hand in that ICU room surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, and he looked at me with those blue eyes that Kieran had inherited, and he told me I was the strongest person he had ever known. He told me I would survive. He told me he loved me more than anything in this world. Then he closed his eyes, and the machines started making different sounds, and nurses rushed in, and someone gently pulled me away from the bed. I stood in the hallway outside the ICU and watched through the window as they tried one more time to bring him back. But Raphael was already gone. Kieran had been in Boston that day, taking depositions for a case. He drove back immediately when I called him, his voice tight with panic on the phone. He made it to the hospital 30 minutes after his father died. When he walked into that waiting room and saw my face, he knew. He collapsed into my arms and sobbed like I hadn't seen him sob since he was a small child. We held each other for what felt like hours, two people who had just lost the center of their universe. For the first few months after the funeral, Kieran was exactly the son I needed. He called every single day. He came to the house at least once a week, sometimes twice. He helped me sort through Raphael's things when I was finally ready to face that task. He sat with me in the office while I went through financial documents, making sure I understood what accounts we had, what the business situation was, what needed to be handled. "I'm here for you, Mom," he would say. "Whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere." He had been dating Camilla for about 6 months at that point. She seemed nice enough, though there was always something a little off about her that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was beautiful, certainly. Polished. She came from money, which I knew appealed to Kieran even though he never said it outright. Her father owned a manufacturing company that made industrial parts for aerospace contracts. Her older brother Bradford was some kind of corporate executive with a corner office in Manhattan and a house in the Hamptons. Camilla was always taking pictures, always posting on Instagram, talking about building her brand and creating her platform. She had maybe 30,000 followers back then, and she treated it like it was the most important thing in the world. Sometimes when she visited the house with Kieran, I would catch her photographing the artwork or the furniture or the view from the terrace. "It's so beautiful here," she would gush. "So elegant, so aspirational." I should have paid more attention to that word. Aspirational. She didn't have these things. She aspired to them. 6 months after Raphael died, Kieran came to me with a proposal. We were having dinner at the house, just the two of us. It was a Sunday evening in late September, and the weather was starting to turn cool. I remember I had made lasagna, one of Kieran's favorites from childhood. "Mom, I've been thinking about your financial security," he said over dessert. "I talked to a lawyer friend of mine about estate planning, and he suggested something that might be really smart for you to consider." I had been grateful for his concern. Here was my son, looking out for me, making sure I was protected. "What did he suggest?" I asked. "Well, right now everything is in your name, right? The house, the investment properties, the business accounts. If something were to happen to you, the estate taxes would be brutal. We're talking millions of dollars that would just disappear to the government." "I have a will," I said. "Dr. Harrison helped your father and me set everything up years ago." "I know, but a will doesn't protect against estate taxes. And there's another issue, too." Kieran leaned forward, his expression serious. "You're a business owner, Mom. If someone ever sued you for any reason, they could come after everything you own. Your personal assets wouldn't be protected." I frowned. "Why would anyone sue me? The business is mostly closed down now. I'm not taking on new projects." "You never know," Kieran insisted. "Someone could slip and fall on one of the rental properties. A former client could claim something. In litigation, people go after whoever has the most money, and that's you. But if the properties were in my name, with you holding lifetime usage rights, then you'd still live here, still control everything, but legally it would be protected from lawsuits and estate taxes." It made sense. At least, in my grief-clouded mind, it made sense. Kieran was a lawyer. He understood these things. And he was my son. Why would he ever do anything to hurt me? "You really think it's necessary?" I asked. "I think it's smart," he said. "I talked to my friend Jake. He's a real estate attorney, and he said he could draw up all the paperwork for almost nothing. As a favor to me. We could have everything transferred within a few weeks." I remember feeling uncomfortable about it, but I couldn't articulate why. There was this nagging feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, but I pushed it down. I was depressed. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly about anything, and Kieran seemed so earnest, so concerned for my well-being. "Let me think about it," I told him, but he kept bringing it up. Every time he called, every time he visited, always with new reasons why it was important, why I needed to do this soon. "The laws might change, Mom. You need to take advantage of this opportunity while you still can." Finally, about 2 months later, I agreed. I signed the papers that Jake prepared. I barely read them. I should have taken them to Dr. Harrison, should have had him review everything, but I didn't. I trusted my son. God help me, I trusted him completely. The wedding happened 4 months later. It was a big event at some country club in Westchester. 200 guests, a band, an open bar. Camilla wore a dress that cost $15,000. I know because she told me. Multiple times. She also told me that she was settling for the country club because the venues she really wanted were booked years in advance, and she didn't want to wait that long to marry the love of her life. I paid for half the wedding, $40,000. Camilla's parents paid the other half. I did it because Kieran was my only child, and this was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. I wanted him to be happy. At the reception, I danced with my son, the traditional mother-son dance. The song was "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong. Kieran held me close, and I remember feeling, just for a moment, like everything might be okay. Like maybe the worst of the grief was behind me, and I could start to heal, and Kieran would build his own family, and I would have grandchildren eventually, and life would find a new kind of normal. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear as we swayed to the music. "Thank you for everything. I know how hard this year has been for you, but things are going to get better now. I promise." I believed him. I wanted so desperately to believe him. The changes started slowly. The weekly visits became every other week, then monthly. The daily phone calls became every few days, then weekly. Kieran always had good excuses. Work was busy. Camilla needed him for something. They were traveling. They were renovating their apartment. They were dealing with family things on her side. When they did visit, Camilla had started making comments. Casual observations that felt like tiny cuts. "This house is so big for just one person, Marlena. Don't you ever feel lonely rattling around in all this space? Or, you should really think about downsizing. All this maintenance and upkeep must be exhausting at your age." Or my personal favorite, "Kieran and I were just saying how this would be the perfect house for a family. You know, kids who could actually use all these bedrooms." I would smile and change the subject. My mother, who still had her apartment in Brooklyn at that point, would shoot daggers with her eyes at Camilla, but she never said anything. Not in front of them anyway. Later, when we were alone, she would grip my arm and say, "That girl is poison, Marlena. I don't trust her." "She's Kieran's wife," I would reply. "We need to make an effort." "She's making an effort," my mother would snap back. "An effort to take everything you have." A year after the wedding, my mother had a fall in her apartment. She broke her hip, and at 80 years old, that's not something you bounce back from easily. I insisted she come live with me while she recovered. The recovery stretched from weeks to months, and eventually it just made sense for her to stay. She had her own suite on the second floor with a bedroom, sitting room, and bathroom. Catalina doted on her. She was happy here. Kieran barely visited after that. "It's too much, Mom," he said when I asked him about it. "Camilla feels uncomfortable with Grandma there. She thinks Grandma doesn't like her." "I wonder why," I had replied, unable to keep the sarcasm completely out of my voice. "See? That's exactly what I mean," Kieran said. "You and Grandma gang up on her. She's my wife. She deserves respect." That was 18 months ago. Since then, I had seen my son maybe 6 times. Always brief visits. Always tense. Always with Camilla, making her little comments and taking her little pictures and asking her little questions about property values and investment portfolios. 3 months ago, Kieran had asked me to sign a comprehensive power of attorney so he could handle things for me if anything ever happened. I refused. That was the first time I had seen real anger flash across his face. "You don't trust me?" he had asked, his voice cold. "It's not about trust," I said carefully. "It's about maintaining my independence. I'm 57 years old, Kieran. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." He had left shortly after that conversation. Didn't even stay for dinner. Now, lying in bed at 3 in the morning, I realized that was probably when the plan had solidified in his mind. When he decided that if I wouldn't cooperate, he would simply take what he wanted by force. I thought about all the signs I had missed. All the red flags I had ignored because I couldn't bear to see my son as anything other than the little boy I had raised. Camilla's measuring tape during that visit 6 weeks ago. The casual questions about whether I had updated my will recently. The real estate agents who had started calling, claiming they had interested buyers for properties in my neighborhood. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I had been too blind, too trusting, too desperately hopeful that my son still loved me to see what was right in front of my face. The worst part was knowing that Raphael had seen it. Somehow, he had known. That's why he left the envelope with Dr. Harrison. That's why he made provisions to protect me. He had seen something in Kieran that I refused to acknowledge, and he had loved me enough to prepare for the worst, even while I clung to hope for the best. As dawn started to break outside my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I finally got out of bed. I showered, dressed in a black suit that Raphael had always said made me look powerful, and applied my makeup with careful precision. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had been knocked down but was far from defeated. At 7:30, I went downstairs. Catalina had already made coffee and was preparing breakfast for my mother. The smell of fresh bread and brewing espresso filled the kitchen, almost normal, almost like any other morning. "How are you feeling, Señora?" Catalina asked softly. "Angry," I replied honestly. "But anger is better than despair. Anger is fuel." My mother appeared in the doorway, looking frail but determined. "Where are you going?" "To see Dr. Harrison, to open the envelope Raphael left for me, to find out exactly how my husband planned to protect me from our son." "I'm coming with you," she said. "Mama, you should rest." "I said I'm coming with you." Her voice was steel. "That's my grandson who did this. My blood. I need to see this through." So we went together, my mother and I, in my Mercedes that I had bought with my own money from my own business. We drove through the morning traffic toward Dr. Harrison's office in downtown Greenwich, and with every mile I felt stronger, more certain, more like the woman I used to be before grief made me weak. Kieran thought he had won. He thought the war was over, but it had just begun. Dr. Harrison's office was on the third floor of a restored Victorian building on Greenwich Avenue, all dark wood paneling and leather furniture that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. His secretary, a woman named Patricia, who had been with him for 30 years, looked up when we entered, and her professional smile faltered when she saw my face. "Mrs. Hartwick," she said, standing immediately. "Dr. Harrison is expecting you. Can I get you some coffee? Tea?" "We're fine, thank you," I said, though my mother accepted a glass of water with a trembling hand. Dr. Harrison appeared in the doorway of his private office within seconds. He was 72 years old, silver-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had handled every major legal matter for Raphael and me since we bought our first investment property together in 1993. He had been at our wedding. He had been at Raphael's funeral. "Marlena," he said, and the way he said my name, with such careful gentleness, told me he already knew this was bad. "Dorothea, please come in." His office was exactly as I remembered it. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with legal volumes, a massive mahogany desk that had belonged to his father, framed diplomas and certificates on the walls. On his desk sat a manila envelope, sealed with red wax. My name was written across it in Raphael's distinctive handwriting. I stared at that envelope and felt my throat tighten. My husband's hand had touched that paper. His fingers had sealed that wax. He had written my name while he was still alive, while I could still reach out and touch him, and now all I had left was this message from beyond the grave. "Sit down," Dr. Harrison said gently, gesturing to the 2 leather chairs across from his desk. "Both of you." We sat. My mother reached over and took my hand again, the way she had yesterday when Kieran destroyed my world. "I'm going to be very direct with you, Marlena, because that's what Raphael would have wanted," Dr. Harrison began. "Your husband came to see me privately about 3 months before he died. He told me he had concerns about Kieran. Serious concerns." My chest felt tight. "What kind of concerns?" "He said he had noticed charges on a credit card that Kieran had asked to borrow for what he claimed were work expenses. When Raphael investigated, he found that Kieran had been using the card at various casinos, Atlantic City, Mohegan Sun, some smaller establishments. The charges added up to nearly $40,000 over 6 months. I felt like I had been slapped. That's impossible. Kieran doesn't gamble. He's always been so responsible with money. Marlena. Dr. Harrison's voice was firm, but compassionate. Raphael showed me bank statements, credit card bills. He had documentation of everything. He also found evidence of online gambling accounts, sports betting sites, poker rooms. Your husband estimated that Kieran had lost somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $70,000 in the year before his death. My mother made a small sound of distress beside me. I couldn't make any sound at all. Raphael confronted Kieran about it. Dr. Harrison continued. They had a conversation that apparently became quite heated. Kieran promised he would stop, that he had it under control, that it was just stress from work. Raphael wanted to believe him, but he also wanted to protect you. "So he left the envelope," I whispered. "Yes, he came to me and said that if Kieran ever did anything to harm you financially or otherwise, if he ever showed himself to be unworthy of your trust, I was to give you this immediately. He said it contained everything you would need to protect yourself." Dr. Harrison pushed the envelope across the desk toward me. "I think yesterday's events qualify as the circumstance he was anticipating." I picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The wax seal felt cool and smooth under my fingers. Breaking it felt like breaking a connection to Raphael, the last physical thing he had left for me. Inside were several documents. The first was a letter, written in Raphael's handwriting on his personal stationery. The sight of his writing made tears spring to my eyes immediately. "My dearest Marlena," it began. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true, and our son has betrayed you in some fundamental way. I cannot tell you how much it pains me to even consider this possibility. But I have learned that love requires both trust and protection, and right now, I need to protect you." I had to stop reading for a moment to collect myself. My mother squeezed my hand tighter. The letter continued. "I have discovered that Kieran has a serious gambling problem that he has been hiding from both of us. I confronted him, and he promised to seek help, but I am not confident he will follow through. Gambling addiction is a powerful thing, and I fear it will lead him to make increasingly desperate choices. I pray that I am wrong. I pray that you never read this letter because Kieran proves himself to be the man I hoped he would become. But if I am right, if he has done something to hurt you, then you need to know the truth about what I have prepared for your protection." My hands were shaking so badly now that the paper rattled. Dr. Harrison stood and moved to a sideboard where he poured 2 glasses of whiskey, pressing one into my free hand. "Drink," he ordered. I did. The letter went on to explain that Raphael had opened a separate account at a different bank, one that only he and Dr. Harrison knew about. He had been quietly moving money into it for 2 years before his death, using dividends from investments and proceeds from property sales that I had been too busy to track closely. The account now contained $2,400,000. "That money is yours and yours alone," Raphael had written. "No one can touch it. No one even knows it exists except Harrison. Even if Kieran somehow managed to get control of everything else, you will have this. You will be safe. You will be able to fight back." But that wasn't all. The envelope also contained copies of bank statements showing Kieran's gambling activity, printed and organized with Raphael's typical attention to detail. Credit card bills from casinos, screenshots of online gambling accounts, a spreadsheet tracking losses over time. The total was staggering. In the 3 years leading up to Raphael's death, Kieran had lost nearly $120,000. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Where was he getting this kind of money?" "That's the question Raphael asked," Dr. Harrison said. "He suspected Kieran was using client funds from his law practice. He couldn't prove it, but he had his suspicions. There was more." The envelope contained a document that Raphael had prepared, but never executed, a legal challenge to any transfer of property that might occur after his death. He had outlined the argument that any such transfer would likely occur during a period of my grief and vulnerability, making it potentially voidable as having been obtained through undue influence or diminished capacity. "He thought of everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He knew what Kieran might do." "Raphael loved you more than anything in this world," Dr. Harrison said. "And he loved Kieran too, which is why this must have been agony for him. But he was also practical. He understood that addiction changes people, makes them capable of things they would never normally consider." I looked at my mother. Tears were streaming down her weathered face, but her expression was fierce. "That boy," she said. "That stupid, stupid boy. Throwing away everything for what? For money to lose at poker? For that terrible woman who only wants him for what she thinks he has?" "The transfer of property," I said, turning back to Dr. Harrison. "Can we challenge it?" "Absolutely. Based on what Raphael documented here, we have multiple grounds. Undue influence during a period of grief, misrepresentation of the purpose of the transfer. And if we can prove that Kieran's primary motivation was to facilitate his gambling addiction or to satisfy debts, we might even have grounds for fraud." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since yesterday. "How long will it take?" "That depends on several factors. If Kieran fights us, it could take months. But Marlena, I need to tell you something else." Dr. Harrison's expression turned even more serious. "I did some research after your call last night. The deed transfer that Kieran filed at the registry office has a problem. The attorney who prepared it, this Jake person, he's not licensed to practice in Connecticut. He's only licensed in New York." I blinked, What does that mean? It means the transfer might be invalid on its face. It means we might be able to get an emergency injunction to prevent any sale of the property while we sort this out. It means Kieran made mistakes because he was in a hurry, and those mistakes might be exactly what we need to stop him. The room seemed to spin for a moment. You're telling me that I might not have to leave my house? I'm telling you that I'm going to file papers this morning for a temporary restraining order preventing any change in ownership or occupancy of the property. I'm also going to file a lawsuit to void the transfer entirely. And I'm going to make it very clear to Kieran and his wife that if they set foot on that property with any intention of removing you or your belongings, they will face criminal charges for trespassing and potentially elder abuse. Elder abuse, I repeated. I'm 57 years old. In Connecticut, financial exploitation of anyone over 55 can qualify as elder abuse in certain circumstances. And Marlena, you were 55 when you signed those papers, still deep in grief over losing your husband. Any prosecutor would take one look at this situation and see exactly what it is: a son taking advantage of his vulnerable mother. I set the whiskey glass down on the desk because my hands were shaking too badly to hold it anymore. What do I need to do? First, you need to go home and stay there. Don't leave. Don't let them intimidate you into going anywhere. Second, I need you to sign some documents authorizing me to act on your behalf. Third, I need you to prepare yourself for this to get ugly. Kieran is going to be served with papers today. He's going to realize that you're not as helpless as he assumed, and he's going to panic. Let him panic, my mother said sharply. Let that boy feel 1/10 of the fear and pain he's caused his mother. We spent the next hour in Dr. Harrison's office, signing papers, reviewing documents, and planning strategy. He explained that he would contact the registry office immediately to flag the deed transfer as disputed. He would file for the restraining order within the hour. He would also reach out to the real estate agents that Camilla had contacted and inform them that the property was not legally available for sale. What about the money? I asked. The account Raphael set up? That's yours free and clear. I'll arrange for you to have full access to it by tomorrow. In the meantime, you should probably check your other accounts to make sure Kieran hasn't tried to access anything else. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and logged into my bank accounts. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but when I looked more carefully, I noticed several small transfers out of my checking account over the past 2 months. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Amounts small enough that I might not notice right away, but adding up to nearly $20,000. He's been stealing from me, I said, my voice hollow. For months, just taking money and hoping I wouldn't notice. Dr. Harrison's jaw tightened. Screenshot all of that. Forward the statements to me. That's more evidence for the case. By the time we left his office, it was almost 11 in the morning. My phone had been buzzing in my purse for the past 30 minutes, but I had ignored it. Now, standing on the sidewalk outside the Victorian building with my mother beside me, I finally looked. 12 missed calls from Kieran. 8 text messages. The texts started out confused. Mom, why isn't anyone answering the door? Then irritated. I told you to be ready by 9. Where are you? Then angry. You're really going to make this difficult? Fine. I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. The last message had come through 5 minutes ago. A process server just showed up at my office. What the hell did you do? I stared at those words on my screen, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Good. Let him panic. Let him feel the ground shift under his feet the way he had made me feel. Senora Marlena. Catalina's voice was breathless when she answered my call. Senor Kieran and his wife, they came to the house. They brought a locksmith. They were trying to change the locks. But then a man in a suit came and gave Kieran some papers, and Kieran's face, it went white like snow. Then they left. They were shouting at each other in the driveway. The whole neighborhood could hear. It's okay, Catalina. We're coming home now. Everything is going to be okay. But as we drove back toward Greenwich, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Hartwick? A man's voice, rough and unfriendly. You don't know me, but I know your son. He owes me a lot of money. $180,000 to be exact. I hear he was planning to pay me back by selling your house. Is that true? My blood ran cold. Who is this? Let's just say I'm a concerned creditor. Now your son tells me he can't sell the house because you've made some legal trouble. That's a problem for me, Mrs. Hartwick, because if he can't pay me, I'm going to have to start making his life very uncomfortable. And maybe yours too. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining a situation. Your son made promises. He took out loans with certain people who expect to be repaid. If he can't repay them, those people get creative about collecting. You understand? I pulled the car over to the side of the road, my heart pounding. My mother was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I don't know who you are, and I don't care. My son's debts are his problem, not mine. If he borrowed money from you, that's between you and him. But if you or anyone associated with you comes near me or my property, I will call the police immediately. Are we clear? There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You've got spine. I'll give you that. But here's the thing, lady. Your son used your house as collateral. He told us that house was his, free and clear. He said we could put a lien on it if he couldn't pay. So actually, this is very much your problem. That's impossible. He couldn't have put a lien on property that he doesn't legitimately own. Well, he did, or he tried to. Guess we're all figuring out at the same time that your boy is a liar and a cheat. But the thing is, Mrs. Hartwick, I don't really care about the legal niceties. I care about getting my money. So you and your lawyer and your son better figure out how to make me whole, or things are going to get complicated for everybody. Have a nice day. He hung up. I sat there on the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. My mother was saying something, but I couldn't hear her over the rushing sound in my ears. Kieran hadn't just stolen my house. He had borrowed money against it from what sounded like very dangerous people. He had put both of us in danger. When I could finally drive again, I called Dr. Harrison and told him about the conversation. His response was immediate and decisive. Go straight home. Lock the doors. I'm calling the police to report the threat. I'm also calling a colleague who specializes in criminal law. Marlena, this just became much more serious than a family property dispute. The house looked exactly the same when we pulled into the driveway. The same beautiful stone facade, the same perfectly manicured lawn, the same view of Long Island Sound in the distance. But everything felt different now. Everything felt tainted and dangerous. Catalina opened the door before we could even use our keys. Her face was blotchy from crying. There's more, she said. After they left, I went to check the mail. There was an envelope. It's addressed to you, but it's not from anyone we know. The envelope was plain white, my name written in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message composed of letters cut from magazines, like something from a crime movie. Your son owes us money. If we don't get it, we'll take it from you. You have 1 week. My mother took one look at it and had to sit down. Catalina crossed herself and began muttering prayers in rapid Spanish. And I stood there in my foyer, in my beautiful home that I had built with my own hands and my own sweat, holding a threatening letter from loan sharks, and I realized that my son hadn't just betrayed me. He had destroyed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Kieran. Mom, we need to talk. Please. I can explain everything. Just call me back. I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to call him. Wanted to hear his voice. Wanted him to tell me this was all a terrible mistake, that he was sorry, that he loved me. But the larger part of me, the part that had survived poverty and built a business and buried a husband, knew better. Kieran had made his choices. He had chosen gambling over family. He had chosen Camilla over his mother. He had chosen easy money over integrity. And now he was in trouble, and he wanted me to save him one more time. Well, I was done saving him. I was done being the person he could use and discard and threaten and manipulate. I had spent 57 years being strong for other people. Now I was going to be strong for myself. I deleted his message without responding. Then I turned to my mother and Catalina, these two women who actually loved me, and I said, we need to prepare. This is going to get worse before it gets better, but we're going to survive it. All of us. Together. Outside, dark clouds were gathering over the Sound. A storm was coming, but for the first time since Kieran spoke those cruel words yesterday, I felt ready for it, Let the storm come. I had weathered worse. The storm broke at 3 in the morning. Not the weather storm, though rain was lashing against the windows hard enough to wake me. The other storm. The one I should have seen coming but somehow didn't. I heard glass breaking downstairs. The sharp, unmistakable sound of a window shattering. Then footsteps. Heavy, stumbling footsteps. Someone was in my house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my fingers clumsy with fear as I dialed 911. But before I could press the call button, I heard a sound that stopped me cold. Sobbing. Raw, broken sobbing. And then a voice I knew better than my own. Mom? Mom, where are you? Please, I need help. Mom, please. Kieran. I stood frozen in my bedroom, phone in hand, listening to my son cry somewhere in the darkness below. Every maternal instinct I had was screaming at me to run downstairs, to help him, to fix whatever was wrong. But something else, something harder and more cautious, held me back. I crept to the top of the stairs. The lights were off except for the faint glow coming from the bathroom near the kitchen. I could see broken glass glittering on the foyer floor from where he had smashed through one of the side windows to get in. And I could hear him still crying. These horrible gasping sobs that sounded like they were being torn from his chest. Kieran? I called out softly. I'm here. Mom. His voice cracked. I'm in the bathroom. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore. I descended the stairs slowly, gripping the banister, my phone still clutched in my other hand with 911 ready to dial. The bathroom door was ajar, light spilling out into the hallway. When I pushed it open, I found my son sitting on the floor with his back against the bathtub, his expensive suit rumpled and stained, his face blotchy and wet with tears. His phone was on the floor next to him, the screen lit up with what looked like dozens of messages. But it was his eyes that shocked me most. They were wild, terrified, the eyes of an animal caught in a trap with no way out. What happened? I asked, staying in the doorway, not entering the room. They're going to kill me, he whispered. Mom, they're actually going to kill me. Look. He grabbed his phone and thrust it toward me with a shaking hand. I took it, scrolling through the messages. They were all from unknown numbers, but the content was sickeningly clear. Photos of Kieran entering and leaving his office building. Photos of him at a restaurant with Camilla. Photos of his car in the parking garage. And with each photo, a message. We know where you work. We know what you drive. We know where your wife gets her nails done. You have 48 hours. How much do you actually owe them? I asked quietly. 180,000. But with interest and penalties, they're saying it's closer to 250 now. I thought I could pay them back when we sold the house. I promised them. I signed papers with them, Mom. Papers that said if I couldn't pay, they could... He couldn't finish the sentence. He just dissolved into sobs again. I should have felt sympathy. Any normal mother would have. But all I felt was a cold, hard anger that seemed to fill my entire body. You were going to make me homeless, throw your grandmother out on the street, steal everything your father and I built together, all to pay off gambling debts to criminals? I didn't know what else to do, he shouted, his voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. I'm in over my head. I've been in over my head for years. Dad knew. He tried to help me, but I couldn't stop. I thought I could win it back. I thought I could fix it. And then Camilla, she kept pushing, saying we deserved more, that you were being selfish keeping this huge house when you were just one person, that we needed this, that it was practically ours anyway. Camilla. I said her name like a curse. Where is she now? Kieran laughed, a broken sound with no humor in it. Gone. She left me 3 hours ago. Turns out when you're broke and in debt to loan sharks, you're not quite as attractive as a husband. She took her things and went to her brother's place. She's filing for divorce tomorrow. Her exact words were, I didn't sign up for this white trash drama. Something in my chest twisted despite everything. Not sympathy for Kieran exactly, but a recognition of just how completely his life had fallen apart. In less than 48 hours, he had lost his wife, his mother's trust, his legal standing, and apparently any hope of a future that didn't involve violence from the people he owed money to. There's more, he said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. The firm. They've been investigating me. Someone noticed discrepancies in the client trust accounts. I borrowed some money, just temporarily. I was going to pay it back as soon as we sold the house. But now they're talking about reporting me to the Bar Association. Criminal charges. Mom, I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to prison. The bathroom fell silent, except for the sound of rain hammering against the window and Kieran's ragged breathing. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. This wasn't the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. This wasn't even the man who had stood in my living room yesterday and told me to leave with nothing. This was something worse. This was what happened when weakness and bad choices and toxic relationships combined into a perfect storm of self-destruction. "Why did you come here?" I asked. He looked up at me with those red, swollen eyes. "Because you're my mother. Because even after everything I've done, everything I've said, you're the only person in the world who might still give a damn if I live or die. And because..." He reached into his jacket pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Because I found this in my desk at work. It's from Dad. He must have left it there years ago, and I just found it today." I took the paper. It was a note in Raphael's handwriting, undated. "Kieran," it read, "if you're reading this, it means you've hit bottom. I won't be there to help you, but your mother will be. She's stronger than you know, stronger than I ever was. Tell her the truth, all of it, and then accept whatever consequences come. It's the only way to be free. I love you, son. Even now, even if you've done terrible things. But love doesn't mean rescue. It means giving you the tools to save yourself. Your mother is that tool. Don't waste this chance. Dad." My hands were shaking so badly the paper fluttered like a leaf in wind. Raphael had known. He had known his son would destroy himself, and he had known I would be there when it happened, and he had left this note like a message in a bottle, hoping it would wash up at exactly the right moment. "I need help, Mom," Kieran whispered. "Real help. Not money, not saving. Just, I need to know what to do." I looked at my son sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m, broken and terrified, and finally honest. And I realized this was the moment. This was the choice that would define everything that came after. I could call the police and have him arrested for breaking and entering. I could walk away and let him face the consequences of his actions alone. Or I could do what Raphael's note suggested. I could be strong enough to help Kieran save himself, not by rescuing him, but by forcing him to face the truth. "Get up," I said quietly. "What?" "Get up off my floor. We're going to call Dr. Harrison. We're going to call the police. You're going to confess everything. The gambling, the stolen client money, the fraud, all of it. You're going to face the consequences like a man. And then, if there's anything left of you worth saving after all that, we'll talk about what comes next. But Kieran, understand this. I'm not saving you. Not this time. I'm just giving you the chance to save yourself." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. And when he pulled himself up off the bathroom floor, using the edge of the bathtub for support, I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen in years. I saw my son. The real one. Not the gambling addict. Not the manipulated husband. Not the thief or the liar. Just Kieran. Broken, but maybe, just maybe, ready to start putting himself back together. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," I replied. "Thank me when you're on the other side of this, if you make it there." The rain continued to fall outside as we walked together toward my office to make the phone calls that would change everything. And somewhere in heaven, or wherever he was, I imagined Raphael watching, nodding, knowing that even in death, he had given us exactly what we needed. Not money, not protection, just truth, and the strength to face it. Dr. Harrison arrived at my house at 4:30 a.m, still wearing sweatpants and a Yale Law School t-shirt under his overcoat. He took one look at Kieran sitting in my office, his face gray and hollow, and then at me, standing by the window with my arms crossed, and he understood immediately that everything had changed. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into the chair across from Kieran. "And I mean everything. No more lies, no more half-truths." What came out of my son's mouth over the next hour was worse than I had imagined. The gambling had started in law school, small bets on football games with friends. It escalated after he graduated, when he started going to Atlantic City on weekends. By the time he married Camilla, he was losing thousands of dollars a month. The online poker accounts, the sports betting, the desperate attempts to win back what he had lost, which only led to losing more. I maxed out my credit cards, Kieran said, his voice monotone now, like he had moved beyond emotion into some kind of numb confession. Then I started borrowing from friends, then from colleagues, then from people I met at the casinos who offered me loans at interest rates I didn't really understand. The loan sharks, Dr. Harrison said. Kieran nodded. I owed them $120,000 by last year. They said I had to pay or they would hurt Camilla. I panicked. That's when I started taking money from the client trust accounts at work. I closed my eyes. Client trust accounts, sacred in the legal profession. Money that belonged to clients, held in escrow for settlements or real estate closings or other transactions. Stealing from those accounts wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. It was the kind of thing that guaranteed disbarment and prison time. How much? Dr. Harrison asked quietly. $68,000 over 18 months. I kept telling myself I would pay it back. I kept thinking the next big win would cover everything, but it never came. And the house? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kieran looked at me with such shame in his eyes that I almost felt sorry for him. Camilla found out about the gambling 6 months ago. She was furious. She said if I didn't fix it, she would leave me and tell everyone what I had done. She was the one who suggested using the house. She said you didn't need it, that you were selfish for keeping it when we needed the money. She made it sound reasonable, like I was just taking what should have been mine anyway. So you decided to throw me out, I said flatly. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was desperate. The loan sharks were threatening us. The firm was starting to ask questions about the accounts. I thought if I could just sell the house fast, I could pay everyone off, start over clean. I convinced myself you would be fine, that you had other money, that it wasn't really stealing because the property was technically in my name already. Dr. Harrison was taking notes, his pen scratching across a legal pad. What about the illegal transfer? The attorney who wasn't licensed in Connecticut? Jake. He's a guy I went to law school with. He owed me a favor. I asked him to prepare the transfer documents, but I didn't tell him the whole story. I didn't tell him Mom signed them while she was still grieving Dad. I made it sound like a normal estate planning situation. When he found out the truth, when he realized what I was actually trying to do, he stopped returning my calls. Because he knew he could lose his license too, Dr. Harrison said. Yeah, and now the transfer is probably invalid, and I'm about to be disbarred anyway, and the loan sharks are still demanding their money, and I've lost everything. Kieran's voice cracked again. I've destroyed everything. The rain had stopped outside. Through my office window, I could see the first hints of dawn starting to lighten the eastern sky. In a few hours, this would be a new day. Everything would be different. Here's what's going to happen, Dr. Harrison said, his voice taking on that commanding tone he used in courtrooms. First, Kieran, you're going to write out a complete confession of everything you just told me. Every detail. The gambling, the stolen client funds, the fraudulent property transfer, all of it. Then you're going to sign an affidavit voluntarily returning the property to your mother with no conditions and no claims. You're going to make this right legally before we deal with anything else. Okay, Kieran whispered. Second, we're going to call the managing partner at your firm. You're going to confess to the stolen funds and resign immediately. You're going to cooperate fully with any investigation. Kieran's face went even paler, if that was possible. I'll go to prison. Probably, Dr. Harrison said bluntly. The district attorney will decide whether to prosecute, but your cooperation might help reduce the sentence. And confession is better than being caught. It shows some remaining shred of integrity. And the loan sharks? Kieran asked. Dr. Harrison looked at me. That's where this gets complicated. Marlena, you need to understand something. Those loans are legally unenforceable. They're based on usury and illegal lending practices. Kieran owes them nothing in the eyes of the law. But in their eyes, he owes them everything. And they don't care about the law. So what do? I asked. We need to contact the FBI. This is organized crime, racketeering, loan sharking. This is their jurisdiction. But Marlena, once we make that call, Kieran becomes a witness. He'll need protection. He'll need to testify. And these people will be very, very angry. Kieran was shaking his head. I can't testify against them. They'll kill me. They'll kill all of us. Then you die in debt to criminals, Dr. Harrison said harshly. Or you go to prison for embezzlement. Or you man up, tell the truth, and let law enforcement do their job. Those are your only options now, Kieran. There's no magical fourth option where everything works out and you face no consequences. The silence that followed was suffocating. I watched my son struggle with the reality that his choices had finally cornered him completely. There was no escape, no easy way out, just hard truths and harder consequences. I'll do it, he finally said. I'll testify. I'll confess to everything, whatever it takes. Dr. Harrison nodded. Good. Then let's start making calls. The next hours were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Dr. Harrison called a contact at the FBI's Organized Crime Unit. Kieran called the managing partner at his law firm, and I listened as he confessed everything in a phone call that lasted 23 minutes and ended with him being told to clean out his desk by end of business today and never come back. He called the Bar Association and reported himself before someone else could. My mother appeared in the doorway around 7 in the morning, already dressed, her face set in grim determination. Is he staying? She asked, looking at Kieran. For now, I said, until the FBI gets here. Then I'm making breakfast. People need to eat, even on the worst day of their lives. She disappeared toward the kitchen, and I heard her giving Catalina instructions in a mixture of English and Spanish. Kieran sat at my desk, writing out his confession longhand because Dr. Harrison insisted it be in his own words, his own handwriting. Watching him write, seeing his hand shake with every sentence, I felt something complex and painful that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even sympathy exactly. It was more like recognition. Recognition that this broken man was still my son, and that somehow, despite everything, I still loved him. Not the way I used to, not with that uncomplicated maternal devotion, but with something harder and sadder and more honest. The FBI agents arrived at 9. 2 men in dark suits, 1 woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. They sat in my living room, this room where just 2 days ago Kieran had told me to leave with nothing, and they listened to his confession. They asked questions. They took notes. They made phone calls. The people Mr. Hartwick borrowed from are connected to a larger organization we've been investigating for 3 years, the woman said. Her name was Agent Reyes. If he's willing to testify about his interactions with them, about how the loans were structured, about the threats that were made, that's valuable to us. We can offer him protection, witness relocation if necessary. Relocation? Kieran asked. You mean like witness protection? Potentially. These are dangerous people. They don't like it when their business practices are exposed. But Mr. Hartwick, you need to understand that once you testify, there's no taking it back. You'll be in our system. You'll have obligations, and you'll still face prosecution for the embezzlement. We can't make that go away. I understand, Kieran said quietly. Agent Reyes turned to me. Mrs. Hartwick, you should know that you might be in danger too. They might try to use you to pressure your son into staying quiet. We can offer you protection as well. I looked around my living room, my beautiful home that I had fought so hard to keep. The thought of leaving it now, of being driven out not by my son, but by criminals he had brought into our lives, filled me with a fury so intense I could barely breathe. No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving my house. I'm not hiding. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not being punished for my son's mistakes by losing my home again. Mrs. Hartwick, no, I repeated. You protect Kieran if he needs protecting, but I'm staying right here. If they come for me, I'll deal with it. But I'm not running. Dr. Harrison put a hand on my arm. Marlena, be reasonable. These people are dangerous. I am being reasonable. I'm being strong. There's a difference. I looked at Agent Reyes. You said you've been investigating them for 3 years. Use my son's testimony. Arrest them. Put them away. But I'm not leaving my home. Not for anyone. Not anymore. Something flickered in Agent Reyes's eyes. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of a stubbornness that matched her own. All right. We'll station agents nearby. If anything happens, if you see anything suspicious, you call us immediately. Fine. They left with Kieran 2 hours later. He was going to a safe house while they processed his information and prepared for the raids on the loan shark operation. Before he left, he stood in my foyer, looking small and lost in his expensive suit that hung on him like he had shrunk inside it. "Mom," he said, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make this right. I don't know if you can ever forgive me." "I don't know either," I said honestly. "But Kieran, what your father wrote in that note, he was right. This is your chance to save yourself, not to be saved by someone else, to actually do the hard work of becoming someone worth being. Don't waste it." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I loved him so much, Dad. I wanted so badly to be like him. But I couldn't. I was too weak. Your father was human too. He had weaknesses, but he faced them. He didn't run from them or hide them or let them destroy everyone around him. That's the difference. Not strength versus weakness. It's honesty versus lies. I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it. For yesterday. For what I said. For what I tried to do. I know. And I did know. I believed him. But belief and forgiveness were not the same thing." Agent Reyes touched Kieran's shoulder. "Time to go." I watched through the window as they drove away in a black SUV with tinted windows. My son, my only child, disappearing down my driveway to face consequences that would probably include prison time, disbarment, and years of rebuilding a life he had demolished through his own choices. My mother came and stood beside me. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "Did I? I don't know what the right thing is anymore. You told him the truth. You held him accountable. And you didn't abandon him. That's all any mother can do when her child becomes a stranger." Catalina brought coffee. The three of us sat in the living room as morning turned to afternoon, not talking much, just being together. The house felt different now, not violated anymore, not stolen, just changed, like a place where something terrible had happened, but also where something important had been decided. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Hartwick?" A woman's voice, young, uncertain. "This is Camilla. Please don't hang up." I should have hung up immediately, but curiosity won. "What do you want?" I heard what happened, what Kieran did, confessing everything, working with the FBI. I wanted you to know I didn't know how bad it was. The gambling, the stolen money, the danger. He told me he had some debts, but I thought it was like credit card debt, normal stuff. If I had known— "You would have what?" I interrupted. "Not pushed him to steal my house? Not told him I was selfish for keeping it? Not recorded me being humiliated so you could post it for your pathetic Instagram followers?" Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "You're right. I was terrible. I was shallow and greedy, and I made everything worse. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth, which is probably nothing." "You're right," I said. "It's worth nothing. But Camilla, let me tell you something. My son made his own choices. You influenced him. You manipulated him. You brought out the worst in him. But he chose to listen. He chose to believe that stealing from his mother was acceptable. That's on him. And you get to live with knowing that you're the kind of person who would push someone to destroy their own family for money. That's on you." "I know," she whispered. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down and looked at my mother and Catalina. That was Kieran's wife, ex-wife, whatever she is now. "What did she want?" my mother asked. "To apologize, I think, or maybe just to make herself feel better. Did it work? I don't care if it worked." And I realized I meant it. Camilla was irrelevant now. She was just another person who had revealed their true character under pressure and been found wanting. As the sun set over Long Island Sound, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I stood on my terrace and looked out at the water. This view, this home, this life I had built. I had almost lost it all. I had been betrayed by the person I trusted most in the world. I had been threatened and manipulated and told I was worth nothing. But I was still here, still standing, still strong. And that, I realized, was what real strength looked like. Not never being knocked down, but getting back up every single time. Not never being hurt, but surviving the hurt and becoming something harder and wiser because of it. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Harrison. Property transfer officially voided. House is legally yours again. All documentation filed. You're safe. I smiled. Safe. For now. The loan sharks were still out there, though the FBI had assured me they were close to making arrests. Kieran was still facing prison. My relationship with my son was shattered and might never be repaired. But the house was mine. The fight was won. I had won. 3 months later, I stood in the same living room where Kieran had tried to destroy me. But everything was different now. The late February sun streamed through the windows, warming the Italian marble floors. Outside, the first crocuses were pushing through the partially thawed ground, purple and white against the winter-brown grass. Signs of spring, signs of renewal. The FBI had arrested 14 members of the loan shark operation 6 weeks after Kieran testified. Agent Reyes called me personally to tell me I was safe, that the people who had threatened me were facing federal racketeering charges and would likely spend the next 20 years in prison. Kieran's testimony had been crucial. He had worn a wire for 2 meetings with them before the raids, gathering evidence that sealed multiple cases. Your son did the right thing, Agent Reyes had said. It doesn't erase what he did wrong, but it counts for something. Kieran himself was in a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania, serving an 18-month sentence for embezzlement. The judge had taken into account his cooperation with the FBI, his complete confession, and his genuine remorse. 18 months instead of 5 years. He would be disbarred permanently, but he would survive. He was in mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. He wrote me letters twice a week. I hadn't answered any of them yet. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would never be ready. That was okay too. The law firm had recovered most of the stolen money from the asset seizures related to Kieran's case. The clients who had been affected were made whole. My son's reputation was destroyed, but at least he hadn't left a trail of financial victims in his wake. Small mercies. Camilla had moved to Los Angeles 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Her Instagram account had been deleted after someone leaked the story of her role in the attempt to steal my house. Her family had apparently cut her off. Last I heard, she was working as a hostess at some trendy restaurant in West Hollywood, hoping to meet someone who could restore her to the lifestyle she felt she deserved. I didn't waste energy hating her anymore. She was simply irrelevant. My mother sat in her favorite chair by the fireplace, reading a mystery novel and occasionally commenting on the plot. At 81, she was still sharp, still fierce, still the woman who had taught me that Hartwick women didn't break easily. Catalina was in the kitchen, preparing dinner for a small gathering I was hosting tonight. Just a few close friends, people who had supported me through the nightmare of the past few months. Patricia from Dr. Harrison's office. My college roommate Susan, who had flown in from California when she heard what happened. Agent Reyes, who had become an unexpected friend during the investigation. And Dr. Harrison himself, who had done more than any lawyer should have to do, working at odd hours and fighting like hell to protect me. I owed him more than money could repay. The doorbell rang at 6:30 exactly. I opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of white roses and lilies. For a moment, my heart seized. Anonymous flowers. Was this some kind of threat? Some remnant of the Loan Shark organization? But the card was signed. To new beginnings and old strengths, with profound respect. James Harrison. I carried the flowers to the dining room, arranging them in a crystal vase that had been a wedding gift from Raphael's parents 33 years ago. Everything in this house had a history. Everything had survived, like me. My guests arrived within the next 20 minutes, filling the house with warmth and conversation and laughter. We ate Catalina's incredible paella and drank Spanish wine and talked about everything except the scandal that had consumed my life for months. It was a relief to discuss normal things, books and travel plans and mutual friends and whether spring would come early this year. After dinner, when everyone had moved to the living room with coffee and dessert, Dr. Harrison asked if he could speak with me privately. We stepped into Raphael's office, and he handed me a folder. "What's this?" I asked. "The final accounting. Everything related to the case. The property transfer is permanently voided. The house, the investment properties, all the assets are secure in your name with ironclad protections that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge them again. I've also set up a trust structure that will protect everything even after you're gone. with very specific provisions about who can and cannot benefit from it. I opened the folder and saw page after page of legal documents. My eyes caught on one phrase: Kieran Hartwick shall have no claim, right, or interest in any property or asset held within this trust structure during his lifetime or after the death of the grantor. You wrote him out completely, I said quietly. I wrote him out, Dr. Harrison confirmed, unless you instruct me otherwise. But Marlena, I have to tell you something. That account Raphael set up, the 2.4 million, he left instructions with me about that too. Instructions I wasn't supposed to share unless you asked, but I think you should know now. What instructions? He wanted you to use some of that money to help Kieran if he ever hit rock bottom, not to enable him, not to save him from consequences, but to help him rebuild after he faced those consequences. Raphael believed in accountability, but he also believed in redemption. He wrote that if Kieran ever truly changed, truly faced his demons and came out the other side, you should give him a chance to rebuild his life. Not a fortune, just enough to start over. My throat tightened. Raphael always saw the best in people. He saw clearly, Dr. Harrison corrected gently. He knew Kieran had the potential to be better. He just also knew it would take hitting absolute bottom before that potential could emerge. He was protecting you, yes, but he was also leaving a path for his son to find his way back, if he could. I sat in Raphael's chair, running my hands over the smooth wood of his desk. I don't know if I can forgive him. Kieran, I don't know if I want to. Then don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But Marlena, forgiveness isn't about him. It's about you. It's about whether you want to carry this anger for the rest of your life, or whether you want to set it down someday and move forward lighter. That's a choice only you can make, and it's okay if you're not ready to make it yet. We rejoined the others. The evening continued with more wine and laughter and stories. Around 10, everyone began to leave, hugging me, thanking me for the evening, telling me how strong I was, how inspiring, how incredible. After the last guest left and Catalina had gone to her room and my mother had gone upstairs to bed, I walked out onto the terrace. The night was cold but clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from the city in the distance. I wrapped Raphael's old cardigan around myself and looked out at the dark water of Long Island Sound. I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the fear, the fight, the victory. I thought about my son in his prison cell, hopefully sleeping, hopefully healing. I thought about the man I had loved who had protected me even in death. I thought about the woman I had been 3 months ago, standing in this very room with trembling hands, silent in the face of cruelty. That woman was gone. Or maybe she wasn't gone. Maybe she was just evolved, stronger, harder, wiser. I would never be that naive again. I would never trust so completely or love so blindly. Those parts of me had died when Kieran spoke those words. But something new had been born too. A woman who knew her own strength, who understood that love and boundaries could coexist, who had looked at the worst thing her child could do to her and survived it. My phone buzzed. Another letter from Kieran had arrived electronically through the prison system. I could read it now or delete it. The choice was mine. I let it sit unread, not out of cruelty, just out of self-preservation. Maybe tomorrow I would read it, maybe next week, maybe never. I had earned the right to take my time, to heal on my own schedule, to decide what forgiveness looked like for me, if it looked like anything at all. A shooting star streaked across the sky. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need wishes anymore. I had everything that mattered: my home, my mother, my friends, my strength, my life. Kieran had tried to take it all away. He had failed. I had won not because I was cruel or vindictive, but because I refused to be destroyed. Because when my hands trembled, I didn't open my mouth and give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Because when he fell to his knees crying in my bathroom, I offered him truth instead of easy comfort. Because I understood, finally, that being a good mother didn't mean protecting my child from consequences. It meant teaching him that actions matter, choices matter, and character is built in the hardest moments. The cold was seeping through the cardigan now. I went back inside, locked the terrace door, and turned off the lights one by one. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. My house, my sanctuary, my victory. Upstairs, I passed my mother's room and heard her gentle snoring. I looked in on her, this woman who had taught me everything about strength and dignity. She looked peaceful in sleep, her weathered face soft in the dim light from the hallway. In my own room, I changed into one of Raphael's old t-shirts that I still slept in sometimes. I climbed into our bed, this bed where we had loved and laughed and planned our lives together, where I had lain awake that terrible night after Kieran's betrayal, wondering if I would survive. I had survived, more than survived. I had prevailed. Tomorrow was another day. There would be more challenges, more decisions to make, more letters from Kieran to read or ignore. But tonight, I could rest. I could close my eyes in my own home, safe and secure, knowing that I had fought the hardest battle of my life and won. Not because I was cruel, not because I was vindictive, but because I was strong, because I was a Hartwick woman, because I was Marlena. And that meant something. It meant everything. I turned off the light and let sleep take me, dreamless and deep. The sleep of someone who has nothing left to fear. The sleep of a woman who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth. The sleep of a survivor. The sleep of a winner.